Let's go! LSU loses a commitment in four-star wide receiver Omarion Miller. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you believe this is a massive loss for the class of 2023? And LSU recently has been scoring a lot of recruiting wins, but at the same time, there have been a few losses. Obviously, we did a video earlier this week on Eli Holstein and the quarterback prospects for LSU in the class of 2023. Holstein just went to Alabama, and now LSU loses right now their only wide receiver commitment in this class. So obviously the comment section is always open, and today we're actually going to look at this from two separate angles. We're going to look at Omarion's specific situation and on a macro scale how different college football recruiting is right now. So here's the skinny on Omarion Miller. He is an extremely productive player in North Louisiana. He just dominates. You see the yard per catch numbers here via 247. That is absolutely ridiculous. So he is a very explosive playmaker. As far as like my own personal evaluation of him, he's not necessarily a burner per se, but still you see the explosive playmaking ability. You see some good hands. You still see some good jump ball ability, and he does play the second most valuable position in my mind in college football, which is wide receiver. So on a micro scale, as far as Omarion Miller, I don't think LSU's out of it because LSU does such a good job with in-state wide receivers, albeit last year was a little bit different. Coaching change, that's probably why LSU lost out on so many in-state guys. But still, for the most part, the best in-state wide receivers normally go to LSU, okay? So yes, I do think LSU will get back into the thick of it for Omarion Miller. And look, there are going to be other schools. I could see Nebraska, where Mickey Joseph, who Omarion Miller committed to, I could see them being in contention here. I could see a lot of players being in contention. Another North Louisiana wide receiver, Nicoldis Crawford, ended up going to Nebraska. But you see right there, just the jump ball ability is just insane. But there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to be coming after Omarion. And once again, I just don't think LSU's out of it here. But is this actually a massive loss? Well, it's complicated. Let me start by saying this. Omarion Miller is a fine prospect. I'm going to be very interested in his senior tape, but he is nowhere close to the level of player Shelton Sampson Jr. is at a Catholic high in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And LSU has been really amping up the gas for Shelton Sampson, who is truly an incredible wide receiver prospect. I see a lot of Terrace Marshall and Shelton Sampson Jr., and he is a five-star wide receiver. So for me, I just view Sampson on a completely different level than Omarion Miller, but Omarion is still really, really good. Another Louisiana name to keep an eye out for is Khai Prean. Very interesting transfer to St. James, which, of course, has been, a recruiting hotbed. That's where Shaz Preston ended up going. Alabama went. Also the year before, Savion Jones. So, yeah, and Jones, of course, is a defensive end. It's very interesting. I can't wait to see what Prean's senior tape is going to be, and I think LSU will be in the thick of it. And they normally do, like we just said, a really good job of bringing those guys in. Now, the reason why that is very important is because LSU's strongest position has been wide receiver over the past decade. Now, you can debate defensive back all you want, but the reason why wide receiver is so fascinating to me is over the past decade, the only wide receivers that have been producers at LSU have been Louisiana wide receivers. Now, that's not to say there can't be a wide receiver that comes from out of state and comes to LSU and ends up being successful. Not what I'm saying at all. But if you look, Terrence Tolliver was the last non-Louisiana wide receiver to catch 40 or more passes. So think about that for a second. All the great wide receivers LSU has had, they have all been from Louisiana. All of them. And what's fascinating about that is there have been a lot of receivers out of the state of Louisiana that didn't go to LSU and ended up being total ballers. In fact, one of those guys won the freaking Heisman Trophy. So when you get the opportunity, no matter your personal evaluation of Omarion Miller or any Louisiana wide receiver, what recent history tells us is a Louisiana wide receiver is oftentimes one of the best wide receivers, whether that be a 5-star, 4-star, or 3-star. You normally get a good amount of value out of each and every prospect. So even if you're not in love with Omarion Miller, you know that he is a Louisiana wide receiver, right? And it could be how competitive these Louisiana bootlegger camps are and how competitive 7-on-7 is in Louisiana. You go up against some of the best defensive back prospects, and as many of you know, iron sharpens iron. But for whatever the reason, Louisiana wide receivers are normally the best of the best. Now, that's the thing. Because this isn't a completely deep wide receiver crop in this state, Omarion does become more important. And another reason he becomes more important is LSU's wide receiver crop in this last cycle consisted only of Landon Ibieta. Now, Ibieta has some really special speed and some really special traits, but for the most part, one wide receiver just is not a good class. You normally want to get 3 in every class because of how important the position actually is, and every year you got to have at least 3 to 5 wide receivers that you could trust to go out there and make plays. So, whether you look at PFF's WAA stat or whatever, wide receiver is, to me, I agree with PFF, the second most valuable position. So you look at this from a non-Omarion Miller standpoint, you've got to get more wide receivers. Now, LSU is very lucky that their 2021 crop is not good, but special. They got Jack Besh, they got Malik Neighbors, they got Brian Thomas Jr., and hopefully Chris Hilton develops into something this next year. And, hopefully Kyron Lacey as well. If those guys take a huge step this next year, that softens the blow if Omarion Miller doesn't actually commit. So as far as Louisiana or LSU's outlook at wide receiver, just do whatever it takes to get Shelton Sampson, try and get a few more in this class, and try and get Omarion back on board. Now, we get to really the juicy part of this video, okay? The macro level. Why is this decommitment different? Well, as many of you know, there's this thing called name, image, and likeness, okay? Now, you're looking at Omarion Miller's statement here. And by the way, if you're on Twitter, go follow the relatively new Power Hour LSU Twitter account, and you'll see in Omarion Miller's statement that the word offer is in there. And, normally when in recruiting we think of the word offer, we think of recruiting offer, and that's probably what he means here. But the truth of the matter is, with name, image, and likeness, whether it's legal or not to actually, offer kids name, image, and likeness deals before they actually get to school, it is very real. It is a very big part now of recruiting. So in that statement, Omarion Miller, first off, I totally get why he decommitted, because he did commit very early, and it was a completely different coaching staff, and the young man just wants to open up his options. Totally get it with a new position coach and a new head coach. However, you do read that, and a lot of recruits, I think, are going to decommit over the next couple of months, especially the ones that committed early, because there was another rule outside of name, image, and likeness that just came to the forefront of college football, and that is the scholarship limitations. So the NCAA just passed a rule, and I'm pretty sure it goes into effect right now, that you can sign as many players in a recruiting class that you want. As many, as long as you stay under that total scholarship amount of 85 scholarship players per team. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, commitments, or just recruits in general, don't have the incentive to commit as early as they used to and sign as early as they used to in the early signing period. Because it used to be, if you really wanted to be a part of a recruiting class, you needed to sign early to reserve one of the 25 slots that you can get in a recruiting class. So signing early isn't as important as it used to be, because there is no limitations on the amount of scholarship players. And as a recruit standpoint, if you really, and if I was a recruit, if you really, really wanted me, you would find a way to make room for me, even if I decided to, sign during the later period. So now recruits have a little bit more leverage than they used to, because Coaches don't have to hold that, well, we only have a certain amount of slots left in this recruiting cycle over your head anymore. Now, they do have to keep in mind their total scholarship number, but it's not quite the same as it used to be. So what I think that rule is going to do, it's going to create more mobility in college football. Some of you like that, some of you don't. Whatever the case may be, that's just how it is right now. So when Omarion Miller committed, we were still in the early stages of name, image, and likeness, and the total scholarship numbers were totally different. Now, it's a whole new ballgame with those two rules looking the way that they are right now. So, from a macro standpoint, this is a little bit different, and we're all getting used to it right now. So, for me, I still stand by it. I think it's good that players are able to, use some leverage and get whatever they can. But for the most part, ultimately how you play will determine how much money and how much success you'll make. And look, I don't know too much about Omarion Miller's, certain or his recruiting per se. I don't even know if that even matters to him whatsoever. But because it's just how all of this actually works now, just in general, you're going to see a lot of recruits open things back up or start really relaying, and surveying the different options that they possibly can take for where they want to go at the next level. So comment down below your thoughts on today's video. I hope you guys are having a fantastic Memorial Day and really, thinking about what this holiday means for our country. And, overall, this is, just small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. I'm very lucky to be able to do what I'm doing, and we have a lot of big-time projects heading your way with our running back deep dive, our Patreon that's upcoming. You're going to freaking love it, okay? Now, floating in your face here in just a second, we're going to have some other fun videos if you want to keep the PHL train moving. It is Power Hour LSU. Bam! Haley's doing like some curry tofu, and tonight, teriyaki salmon. Let's go.